Today we'll be working in my workbook called The Commandments and Laws of God. Looking at the table of contents, we have already covered chapter 1 and chapter 2, which was the 10 commandments spoken to God verbally to the people, and then the fear of God, where they say they're so overwhelmed by seeing God through his appearance there that they tell Moses that we just want to hear from you. We don't want to hear directly from God. So now we're going to go into chapter 3. So, and we're going to now get into some of the extra laws other than the 10 commandments. These were the laws that they lived with. So, chapter 3, the laws of God concerning Hebrew servants. Okay. Exodus 21:1. These are the laws you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the seventh year he shall go free without paying anything. These are not servants in that they are being paid a wage, nor are they slaves, as there is time limit for their servitude. These are indentured servants. Indentured servitude is a form of labor in which a person is contracted to work without salary for a specific number of years. These also are the rules for only male Hebrew servants owned by Hebrews. This does not relate to male slaves from other countries. A Hebrew man could become an indentured servant due to poverty, which is covered in Leviticus 25:39, paying off creditors, which is shown in 2 Kings 4:1, or restitution for thievery, which is Exodus 22:3-4. Women became servants in a totally different way, which we'll talk about later. Who was talking to whom? Exodus 20:21. I would say God is talking to Moses. Exodus 20:21. Let's see. 20:21. God is talking to Moses, just as we had thought. Okay. I should have my answers here, but that's for another time. Hopefully I can get through this chapter without having the answers right in front of me. You have the answers if you have the book at the back end of the book. But since the person is buying the Hebrew servant, the person being purchased is not really a servant as we think of it, but an indentured servant. How can a Hebrew man become a servant to another Hebrew? Either due to poverty, paying off creditors, or restitution for thievery. Are these rules for both men and women or just men? Just men. We will deal with women Hebrew servants in a few pages. How many years will the Hebrew servant man be a servant? In the 7 years. And I think it's up to 7 years. I mean, up to 6 years. Maybe it's less for a lesser problem. At the beginning of the 7th year, was the Hebrew servant to pay anything for his freedom? No, he was then able to go free. Yeah. Exodus 21:3. If he comes alone, he is able to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children still belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. So initially this sounds harsh, but let's break this down. Does a Hebrew man have to be single in order to be indentured servant? No, he can be married. If married, can he bring his wife to live with him? Yes. If his wife comes with him, is she also an indentured servant as well? No. Why do you think this is? Because she hasn't had any reason to be an indentured servant, just because she's the wife of the man who's an indentured servant. However, if the master gives him a wife while he's an indentured servant, can she go with him when it is his time to be freed? No. This is because the role of a female Hebrew servant is different, which we will get to in a few pages. But basically, she is a servant under different rules. And so she is still owned by her master. She's not owned by her husband. And if her husband then is free, she is still there under the different rules for a female. If a woman who is given to the servant for his wife has children, who do the children belong to? They belong to the master. They don't belong to the servant. Wow, this sounds really cruel, but reserve judgment until you read about the female Hebrew servants. Based on the scripture below, does the indentured servant go away empty-handed? Deuteronomy 15:12 through 14. If any of your people, Hebrew men or women, sell themselves to you and serve you 6 years, in the seventh year you must let them go free. And when you release them, do not send them away empty-handed. Supply them liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to them as the Lord your God has blessed you. So, no, they don't go away empty-handed. They should have something to be able to start their life with. What are they supposed to receive? Flock, grain, and wine, basically to be able to restart again so they don't come back in the same position. Exodus 21:5. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be servant for his life. Okay. What if a servant wants to stay with his owner? Can he do so? Yes, he can. Assuming the master agrees, where does he take the servant? Before the judges. So this is usually before, in front of the city gates. The judges were first created as the Jews traveled down to Mount Sinai from Egypt when Jethro came to visit his son-in-law Moses in Exodus 18. His vice is shown below. What were the two qualities a judge was to have? Exodus 18:21-22. Jethro tells Moses, select capable men from all people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people of the times. The qualities of the judge should be they fear God, they're trustworthy, and hate dishonest gain. And those are the qualities they were to have. In front of the judges, what is the master going to do to the servant who wants to stay with him? He will pierce his ear with an awl, a hammer and a nail, basically. Basically, is piercing his ear where a ring or some sort of earring would be worn. Why does this have to be in front of the judges? So that they can make sure that it's the servant's desire to do that, to make sure everything's fair and equal. The servant wasn't forced into it or anything. Exodus 21:7. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. Now we come to the Hebrew woman sold as servants. This is a much different issue than the male indentured servant. Young Hebrew females were often sold as a servant to a family with the intention of marriage either to the master or to one of his sons. The laws are then designed based on this premise. When the 6 years are up, is she freed like a male servant? No, she is not. Verses 8 through 11 are the various ways that a woman is freed after her service. Let's study each one. Verse 8, if she does not please the master who selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. In this case, the master purchased her to eventually be his wife. If he is not going to marry her at the end of 6 years, he must do what? Allow her to be redeemed or purchased back. This means that either her father or a kinsman redeemer can buy her back. If she was sold for £6 for 6 years and her father or kinsman redeemer want to buy her back in the 4th year, then he would pay £2. So basically, if it was the end of 6 years, then she's redeemed for free. Does the master have any right to sell her to foreigners? No, he doesn't. Exodus 21:9. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. Exodus 21:10. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. In this case, the master has purchased her to be what? The wife to his son. What does this benefit the woman? she has the same rights as his daughter. What are those rights? Basically, to provide a home, protection, clothing, and food. If the master marries her and then also marries another woman, does the servant woman that he married first lose any of her rights as wife? No, she does not. If her master does not provide for her these three things, if he marries a second wife, then what can happen? Then she could go free with any payment of money. When God gave the law to Moses, he structured it in such a way that it would help distinguish the Israelites from the pagan cultures around them. God used the law to enact change within their societal norms. While pagan nations did not value women, under the law, God made provision for women to be protected, provided for, and granted fair treatment. God showed the Israelites another way of living, which included treating women better than their pagan neighbors. He made sure Israelite women had rights. So we come to the end of the chapter, very quick, but this is the laws chapters, and so they're not very long. Okay, so hopefully I can answer these without looking at the answers. If he marries a female servant and then another woman, the first continues to get food, clothing, and marital rights. Number 4, if a master does not want the female servant he bought for himself, he must let her be redeemed. 6, if a master bought the female servant for a son, she shall have the rights of a daughter. 7, that master has no right to sell his female servant to foreigners. 9, if a servant wants to stay with the master, then he must be taken in front of the judges. 1 down, if a Hebrew slave was given a wife during his service, she is the property of her master. 3, a Hebrew servant is not an employee or a slave, but an indentured servant. 5, for the servant who wants to be a servant for life, his ear is pierced with an awl. I would say pierced, Pierced. Yeah. 8, a Hebrew male servant can only serve for 6 years. So that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it made it better sense on these laws. I had great fun learning these and understanding them.